The real hardwood edge banding that is made commercially and available in rolls is a great product for covering exposed edges on veneered panels. But on small projects or projects where matching veneer tape isn't available, it's surprisingly easy to make veneer strips and apply them with fast cap speed tape. It's such a quick and simple process. I put together this video to show you how I do it. So stay tuned and you'll see what I mean. Whether it's a veneered core like this sheet of knotty alder, or if it's an MDF or particle board core, edge banding is still the best way to cover that core so the edge can be stained, painted, or finished like the face of the material and have it all look the same. For most projects, the commercial variety of real wood edge banding is the most practical. The hot melt glue on the back makes it easy to apply, and even a 250-foot roll is a good value. But on small projects or projects where matching veneer tape isn't available, it's pretty easy to make your own veneer strips and then apply it with fast cap speed tape. Start out with a piece of hardwood of the same species as the veneer you're trying to match. As long as the solid wood is just a little bit thicker than the panel you're putting the edge banding on, you're good to go. I've already flattened this piece of 4/4 alder on the joiner and then ran it through the thickness planer so the two faces are smooth and parallel. Next, I confirm that the joiner fence is perfectly square to the table so that our veneer strip is a consistent thickness. I set the joiner to take a very minimal pass off the edge of the board and then use a slow, steady feed rate to get a smooth, consistent finish on the edge of the board. By pulling back the board, you can see that I'm taking off a very, very light pass from the edge. The joining process leaves a smooth edge that'll take barely a lick of sanding after it's applied. In making thin veneer, there's already going to be more sawdust than veneer. So I'm going to switch out my normal thin kerf blade. I'll use this Bosch blade that's designed for cordless circular saws because the kerf is ultra thin. It's a nice sharp blade. I'll use this forced blade stiffener to keep this thin blade from flexing in the cut. This ultra-thin blade, combined with a dedicated zero clearance insert, is a great combination for cutting these thin veneers without trouble. It goes without saying that equipment used for this process needs to be clean, sharp, accurate, and set up well because the tolerances are so small. And I'm dialing in the fence for a veneer that'll be about 1/32 of an inch thick. And at that tolerance, my eyesight becomes the weak link in the chain. I'd be comfortable using the speed tape for a veneer up to, probably 1/8 of an inch or so. After that, I would probably go to wood glue and clamps. But for this project, I'm shooting for a skinny 1/16 of an inch because it'll blend better with the veneer on the panels when I'm applying it on the edges. It's a little difficult to set up the camera to get a good shot of this ripping process. But what I'm doing is putting the square, smooth jointed face against the fence, making the cut with steady, even, consistent pressure and speed, and then pulling the big piece and the veneer out the back side of the saw. If for some reason I was cutting short pieces of veneer, I may resort to a dedicated push stick to push the veneer strip out and avoid having a piece of veneer turn into a floppy, thin, weak projectile coming back out of the saw. Each time after I rip off a strip of veneer, I rejoint the edge the same way as before and then make another cut. As the piece comes off the saw, I put a quick reference squiggle mark on the back so I know at a glance which side is cut and which side is planed. I just keep joining and ripping strips until I have enough pieces of veneer to take care of the project I'm doing. If the thickness of the strips was absolutely critical, I'd run a test cut and then verify the thickness I was ending up with. This way I've got a fat 32nd of an inch, and 4 of them stacked together are just about 3/16. So I guess these are 3/64 rather than 1/32. But with sharp tools, it's pretty impressive how accurate you can be in cutting these strips. The fast cap speed tape that I'm using to apply the veneer edge band in this video is officially Fast Cap Ultra Bond Permanent Adhesive Speed Tape. It obviously comes in a roll, and it's super sticky adhesive that comes with a heavy paper backer so that it can be applied to edges, and then the heavy paper backer is removed to expose the adhesive to apply the edge banding. The tools I use for applying edge banding with this fast cap speed tape are the same as with the commercially available veneer tapes, with the exception of the fact that I don't need an iron to apply it. I have a soft roller, a hard roller, a file, flush cut snippers, and a sanding block. When I can get away with it, I'll use an edge trimmer for making the edge banding flush with the panels. But with this veneer and this thickness, I rely on a router with a 15-degree bit in it to trim the wood, because I found that the razor trimmers tended to chip and splinter the edge banding because it's a bit thicker than the commercially available product. Once the veneer strips are cut and ready to apply, I'll put the panel in a vise that keeps it at a good working height. And I'll just point out here that the results of the edge banding are going to only be as good as the quality of the surface on the cut edges. I use a sharp blade with a consistent feed rate in a well set up saw so that there's no burn marks or blade scoring marks in these edges. Because the veneer tape is as thin as it is, any imperfections in the edge will just telegraph right through this tape so that you'll be able to see those defects in the finished surface. I choose to take an extra measure to ensure these edges are as clean as can be, because it's essential that there's no splinters or sawdust left on the edge. If there are, the adhesive sticks to the sawdust, and when the sawdust comes off, so does the edge banding. So I just take a good strip of high quality 3M masking tape, roll it down with a hard roller, and then peel it off. And any loose grain or splinters or sawdust that's on the edge comes off on this tape. And you can't see it, but there is some on there. I feel better about having it gone, but I wouldn't argue with somebody that said that this step isn't really necessary. Once I have the edge cleaned up, I simply apply a strip of the fast cap tape, leaving a little extra on the end and roughly centering it up on the edges. Once the tape is on, I give it a good firm roll down with a stiff roller. A regular laminate roller with a rubber wheel is a good option here, as well as the speed roller that Fast Cap makes. They're all good solutions. Because this tape is so sticky, I do things a little different here in that I trim off the adhesive with its paper backer first before applying the wood veneer, because I don't want that little flange of glue getting wound up on my router bit and making a mess out of things. On a small panel, it'd be easier to take it out of a vise and put it right side up on a workbench to trim this edge off, but I'm just using this larger panel as an example. I make sure I have a good fresh edge on my box cutter, and then just cut up into a piece of scrap lumber. I'm keeping the blade pushed and flush with the panel. If I go this way, it'll slice into veneer, and don't want that. That way the backer and the glue come off ahead of time and don't come up the router bit. You can see how sticky this stuff is. Once you get into production mode and you're not shooting video, this goes really fast. After I've trimmed the edges, I'll give it another roll with the roller just to make sure everything is really stuck. And then take that sharp knife and lift the backer tape off the adhesive. I don't want any dust in the air in the shop at this point. Keep everything clean. Make sure there's no dust on the back of the veneer. And the veneer is marked with a squiggly line for front and back. And then I leave just a little bit hanging over the end. Roughly center this up with my fingers. Fast cap flush trim snippers are the best for this application. Snip and launch these ends. And I snip the ends before I roll it because I don't want the roller to bend that end down and booger up the end. Like I said before, with some veneers and some cutters, this could be used to flush trim the veneer to the panel. But with this thickness of veneer and this species of wood and this particular cutter, it just chips and splinters the edge. So I'm using this Bosch Colt router with a 15-degree bearing guided trimming bit to take off this lip of veneer. Make sure that you set the height of the router bit accurately so that it doesn't take too much or not enough of the veneer tape off. The goal is to have the bevel cut made by the router intersect this flat face precisely at the glue joint. It's a little tricky to set up, but once the setup work is done, the trimming work goes quick and easy. Because that glue is so sticky and tenacious, it leaves a little bit of residue behind when the veneer is trimmed away. My favorite method of cleaning that up is with a sharp putty knife. I just drag that glue residue off the surface. Make sure that that glue is removed before using sandpaper, otherwise it'll just melt it, gum it up, and push it into the wood. There are dedicated tools made with 2 beveled pieces of sandpaper for sanding this edge, but because of the close tolerances due to the thinness of the veneers, I like to use something that I have a little more control. A laminate file is one good solution for making sure the surfaces are flush and that nothing hangs up on the edge of that veneer tape. And in this application, I just have 150 grit sandpaper on a stiff, hard sanding block, and I can give it a few passes on the edge, a couple on the face, and then a whisk on that beveled cut. And this is just a sample panel I'm doing here, but it's hard to believe as it seems. With no heat tape, no wood glue, just a film of that fast cap glue, this stuff is really stuck. It'll chip like anything else, but you can see that the veneer isn't separating from the wood. I can get it to come off, but it's going to come off in pieces and chunks. That's with no drying time, no cooling time, no heat up time, or anything. That's an excellent bond and finished product. And that's the exact process I used for edge banding these pieces of plywood for the small cabinet I'm building. And you can see I just needed to cover one edge of the panel because only one edge shows. For an application like an exposed shelf or a door where 2 adjacent edges need to be done, that's a simple process as well. I give a little thought to which edge I do first, depending on what kind of wear the panel might be exposed to. If this was the top of a door, I'd do the side first and the top later because somebody wiping across the edge of the panel might tend to chip the wood on that corner. It's important to maintain a very crisp, sharp edge if a second piece of veneer is going to be applied. I like the panel at a nice, solid working height. Keep the process as predictable and consistent as I can. This end grain edge of this panel released more sawdust and flakes onto the masking tape, so I still think it's a good step even though it might be a little overkill. This is the time that you're thankful for a good, stubborn, sticky product. And I almost spoiled it there by breaking off that edge and getting sloppy with the roller. One final note, where the second layer laps over the first, give it just a slightest rounded easing to make sure there's no sharp edges that can get caught. Well, I think that should pretty well cover the process that I use for applying custom hardwood edge banding with fast cap speed tape to the edges of veneer panels. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, spread the word around, subscribe if you haven't. Feel free to comment below if I missed something, or if you have tips or ideas to make this process quicker and simpler. I like to hear those things, and I think it's a benefit to other viewers and subscribers. So, from Next Level Carpentry, thanks for watching. So, from all of us here at Next Level Carpentry, thanks for watching.